I spoke a short time ago to Mark Watson. He's director of the ASPI office in Washington, and I began by asking him just how significant these meetings are.
Kieran, these are annual events meant to be reciprocal, once in Washington and then back in Australia, but this time we're doubling up here in Washington. But they're very important for Australia in particular to align our policies and our expectations with the United States. And at a time when China is obviously been placing enormous pressure on Australia, these sorts of meetings with our largest and most powerful ally are obviously very important.
Following the bilateral meeting, the pair will be joined by the British Defence Secretary, Defence Secretary Wallace. How are things tracking on the AUKUS front as you read it?
Look, there's still a lot of issues that have to be worked through, particularly in relation to the nuclear submarines. I think there's a range of other advanced technology issues that are being worked through and projects that you will see probably easier progress on because they're often starting from zero. So all the parties, Australia, the US, UK, and any other country that might be able to join in those discussions, it starts right from the beginning in a shared environment. The nuclear submarines, however, has a couple of major issues, not the least of which is who's going to build them. How much capacity there is in the United States system to add more submarines. Now, there may be a creative solution for this to have Australia take on some of the industrial burden, if you like, of building these. But the reality is the United States at the moment is meant to be producing around 2 submarines per year, and they're only producing around 1.3 themselves. So there is a capability shortfall in the ability to build these submarines. So this trilateral discussion, Australia, the US and the UK, very important because they will have to make some serious announcements in March next year. That will be the end of the 18-month initial review period to come up with a plan how we're going to build these submarines in the future, what sort of timeframes we're looking at, and whether we need some interim measures with US submarines or in some other form.
Yeah, we'll be watching that closely over the next couple of years, that's for sure. Now, the Foreign Minister is also in Washington, Penny Wong, with her Defence Minister counterpart for those AUSMIN talks between the US and Australia. What's on the top of the agenda there?
Well, AUKUS, obviously, and China. There will be a lot of discussion around how to deliver on these commitments, but you'll find that at a meeting like this, most of the outcomes are pre-cooked, as in there'll be a lot of agreement already about positions and what could go into a joint communique. It's important to have announceables out of a meeting like this, and you'll find that there will be a joint communique issued at the end. Leaving aside the really hard power elements of AUKUS, submarines, etc., I think you'll find there'll be a lot of discussion and agreement around environmental issues, around support for countries in our part of the world, the sort of measures that I think will play well in Washington and in Canberra, and that represent a change in emphasis. Senator Wong has recognised for quite some time that the Australia-US alliance needs to be about more than just the hard power elements of defence and national security. And I'm sure she in particular will be pushing other items on the agenda to really cement that relationship in a new direction, if you like.
Would you see it as a precursor of sorts to a visit from Prime Minister Albanese to the White House? Because while he's had a number of meetings with Joe Biden, he hasn't yet been to the White House for a formal visit.
That's right. It's interesting that as we speak, we're finishing up a state visit by the President of France, and that was one of the elements, if you like, of the sweetener that was given to France in the wake of the disagreements over AUKUS and how it was negotiated and how it was announced. And President Biden at the time certainly expressed his concern at the way that it occurred. And I think this state visit, the first of the Biden administration, is an example not only, of course, of the recent events, but France being one of the United States' oldest partners and allies going all the way back to the Revolutionary War. But an official visit by an Australian Prime Minister is a big deal, and that is differentiated from a working visit. But if the Prime Minister were to be afforded an official visit in 2023, that would be a very significant milestone as well. I also think we can probably expect to see the President down in Australia, probably in May, for a Quad leaders meeting to be held in Australia.
ASPI Washington Director Mark Watson, great to get your insights as always. Thanks.